In 2008, Houston finished a $2.8 billion expansion of the Katy Freeway, widening it to 26 lanes. At its broadest point, it is so wide that standing in the middle of it, you cannot make out what businesses are on the other side. 26 lanes of concrete running west from downtown toward the suburb of Katy, roughly 30 miles away, the widest highway in the world. The initial results after completion looked promising. Commute times fell. Engineers declared it a success. Then from 2011 to 2014, analysts using Houston's official traffic tracking data found that morning commutes had increased by 25 minutes and afternoon commutes by 23 minutes compared to before the expansion. One stretch from downtown to Pin Oak was 51% slower than before the widening began. In October 2024, the Texas Department of Transportation broke ground on the North Houston Highway Improvement Project, a rebuild of I-45 north of downtown. The stated goals are reducing congestion, improving safety, and strengthening evacuation routes. The projected cost is $13 billion. Houston has not run out of ideas. It keeps having the same one. Houston drivers lost 70 hours to congestion in 2025, up 6% from 66 hours the year before, at an average personal cost of $1,289 per driver in wasted time and vehicle wear. That figure places Houston 8th most congested in the United States, behind Chicago at 112 hours, New York at 102, Philadelphia at 101, Los Angeles at 87, Boston at 83, and Miami and Atlanta tied at 75. By raw hours lost, Houston is not the worst American city for traffic. It is, however, the city where the solutions make the least sense, because Houston has spent more money than almost any other American city trying to fix its traffic through the specific method that transportation economics has documented repeatedly does not work. The reason this is impossible to fix is not complicated. It is one of the most thoroughly researched phenomena in transportation planning, and it has a name: induced demand. The concept is straightforward. When you add capacity to a road, you make driving more attractive. Commutes that previously seemed too long become manageable. Businesses relocate further out because highway access improved. Developers build subdivisions in areas that were too far from the city before the new lanes opened. The new capacity fills up. The road that was supposed to solve congestion generates the conditions for more of it. Economists Gilles Duranton and Matthew Turner have called this the fundamental law of road congestion, and the evidence for it is so consistent across cities and decades that calling it a law is not hyperbole. It is a description of what happens almost every time. The Katy Freeway is the most expensive single American demonstration of this law, a $2.8 billion investment in the widest highway in the world, and within a few years the commute was 51% slower than before construction began. Texas looked at this outcome and approved a $13 billion follow-up on a different highway. This is where the title of the video comes from. The problem is not that the solution is unknown. The problem is that the solution keeps being rejected in favor of the thing that is documented to make it worse. To understand why Houston specifically is in this situation, you need to know what it is and what it never was. Chicago, which leads the country at 112 hours of congestion annually, has a different problem. Chicago was a dense major city before the car existed. Its streets were built for horses, pedestrians, and streetcars. When the automobile era arrived, those streets and neighborhoods were already there, and the highway system was built around an existing city rather than instead of one. Chicago's transit problem is structural routing. Its train network was designed when everyone commuted downtown in the morning and home in the evening. And now commuting goes in every direction to suburban employment centers that the hub-and-spoke system cannot efficiently serve. Someone living in Naperville and working in Schaumburg cannot take the train. The train does not go that way. That is a fixable problem, and Chicago is attempting to fix it. The bones of a functional transit system exist. Atlanta's story is about a city that had something and destroyed it. Atlanta's electric streetcar network peaked at 154 million annual riders in 1946. It was dismantled in the 1950s. Highways were carved through established walkable neighborhoods. The city made a specific decision to tear out what it had and replace it with car infrastructure, and it has been dealing with the consequences ever since. Houston's story is simpler and harder. Houston was still a relatively small city when the automobile arrived, and it grew primarily in the automobile era with no zoning code to constrain it. The city that grew up was built around driving at every scale, from the freeway network to the street grid to the parking minimums that produced Harris County's current ratio of at least 3 parking spaces for every registered vehicle. There was no pre-automobile Houston to destroy. The city never accumulated the bones that Chicago and Atlanta had before the car era. It just built outward, following the highways until it covered an area the size of New Jersey. Freight is the other layer that makes Houston's traffic problem uniquely difficult. Houston is the largest port in the United States by total cargo tonnage and one of the largest petrochemical complexes in the world. The trucks that serve those industries share the same highways as the commuters. The Katy Freeway does not just carry suburban commuters from their homes to their offices, it carries chemical tankers, industrial freight, and distribution vehicles that have no practical alternative route. Pricing the Katy Freeway corridor would have economic ripple effects far beyond morning commuters deciding whether to work from home on Tuesdays. This is what makes Houston's version of this problem structurally harder than Atlanta's or Chicago's. Chicago's subway network can, in theory, be expanded to serve suburb-to-suburb commuting. Atlanta has corridors with existing density where transit expansion is plausible. In Houston, the density required to make transit work does not exist across most of the metro, and it does not exist because the metro was built assuming driving would always be the answer. Each element reinforces the others and has been reinforcing them for 70 years. Houston does have transit. Metro operates light rail and an extensive bus network, and ridership has been growing. The light rail is genuinely useful in the corridors it serves. Houston's light rail does connect downtown to Hobby Airport. It does not reach George Bush Intercontinental, the larger of the 2 Houston airports and the one most business travelers use. But the Hobby connection is at least a genuine transit link to somewhere people actually fly from. The problem is scale. The Katy Freeway corridor alone carries more daily vehicle trips than Metro's entire rail system carries in a year. The bus network serves more of the city than the rail does, but the city is so spread out that bus routes covering useful distances require trip times that make them impractical for most commuters. In Atlanta and Chicago, the argument for transit expansion is that you are adding service to a metro area where density already exists in significant portions. In Houston, you are trying to retrofit transit to a city whose entire physical structure was built to make transit non-viable. The routes are too long, the stops are too far from destinations, and the destinations themselves are arranged in ways that make walking from a transit stop to anywhere specific an unrealistic ask. This does not mean transit cannot improve in Houston. Metro has been expanding and ridership has grown. Transit can help. What it cannot do is serve as the primary solution to a traffic problem created by 70 years of building a city that only works by car. The scale of what would need to change in the built environment for transit to meaningfully replace driving across the Houston metro is fundamentally a land use question, and Houston has been answering it with more sprawl for as long as it has existed as a major city. There is a solution that works. London implemented a congestion charge in 2003, requiring drivers to pay to enter the most heavily trafficked parts of the city center during peak hours. Traffic fell 30% almost immediately. Singapore has operated a similar system for decades. Stockholm reduced traffic by 20% after implementing congestion pricing in 2006. The evidence that congestion pricing reduces traffic is as consistent as the evidence that adding lanes does not. The mechanism is direct. When driving into a congested area costs money, some people choose not to. They take transit, shift their travel times, work from home, or move closer to their destinations. The behavior responds to the cost in a way that it does not respond to new lanes, because new lanes make driving cheaper rather than more expensive. Houston has studied congestion pricing. It has explored managed lane toll systems on specific corridors. It has never implemented a comprehensive congestion charge for the urban core, largely because the political environment in a city and state where driving is both a practical necessity and a cultural identity makes pricing a politically toxic conversation. A city with no meaningful transit alternatives cannot honestly charge most of its residents for using the only practical way to get anywhere, which is also a fair point. The congestion pricing argument works best in cities that have transit alternatives, and Houston has limited ones precisely because the car-dependent development pattern that produces the traffic also makes transit hard to build effectively. This is the loop that makes Houston's traffic essentially impossible to fix at the source. The sprawl creates car dependency. The car dependency limits transit viability. The limited transit makes congestion pricing politically untenable. The politically untenable pricing means the only available response is more highway capacity. The highway capacity generates more sprawl, and the loop continues. In 2025, the IH-610 North Loop posted the steepest single-year congestion increase in the Houston region, up 21% in the morning and 32% in the afternoon compared to 2024. Nationally, the average American driver lost 49 hours to traffic in 2025, up from 43 hours the year before, at a total national cost exceeding $85 billion. Congestion is a national problem. Houston is just further along in demonstrating what it looks like when the only available solution is the one that has been consistently documented to not work. The $13 billion I-45 expansion is currently under construction. Texas says it will reduce congestion, improve safety, and make evacuation easier. The Katy Freeway said the same things. The Katy Freeway cost $2.8 billion, and the commute got 51% slower. Traffic in Houston is impossible to fix, not because the solutions are secret. It is impossible to fix because the city was built in a way that makes every durable solution structurally difficult, and the response to that structural difficulty has been, for 7 decades, to build more of what created it. The Katy Freeway is 26 lanes wide. It is slower than it was before it was widened. The lesson costs $2.8 billion. Texas is currently spending $13 billion to learn it again on a different road. Houston will report back in about 10 years, when the new I-45 lanes have filled up and someone is discussing the next project. The math will be the same, it always is.